Hello, so we're going to look at a new deck that I have purchased. It's called the Animal Totems and the Ching, and there are 79 cards in this deck. So the first thing I had to do was, when I saw this deck, I was like, okay, it looks cool, but now that I'm looking at it, there's this term here that's called the Ching, and I've never heard that before. So I did a quick Google Earth search, and it says that the I Ching is an ancient Chinese divination text among the classics. And I've never heard this before, and this comes from the Western Zhao period. So this is 800 before Christ times. So it dates all the way back to there. So the main part of what is called the I Ching is that it's a divination called claromancy, which uses random numbers. And so the random numbers are chosen. So there's six numbers that are chosen, and they're between 6 and 9, and they're turned into a hexagram picture. And then that way you can, look it up later. So in Chinese characters, they use lines. So I don't know if you'll be able to see it on the box. You might be able to see it later on the cards, but there's lines. And these lines represent a number. And then the number represents to, whatever interpretation it is. So this is something definitely out of my normal realm. I originally purchased this deck just because I saw animal totems, and I'm a huge fan of animals in divination, so I thought that was interesting to look at. So looking at the side of the box, I'm definitely seeing the animals matched with those characters, like I said, on the claromancy chart, on the hexagram. And then flip it over. So we have a couple more here. Yep, more. And then on the back, so it says, within this box is a pairing of totemic language and animal archetypes with the I Ching classical text. And so, so there's a guide that puts an animal to a number in both positive and negative aspects of that character. And so there's the cards and then the booklet that goes with it. So let's take a look. So typical cardboard box. So again, this is nice. It comes with its own box. If we take a look at the back of the cards, it has the animals with the matching I Ching number. I can't read it yet, so it could be any number that it could be, but we shall see. And then on the reverse side are all the animals. And these are in order from 1 to 79. So it starts with the spider and ends with the woodpecker. So looking at the card itself, so we have the number, and then there's a description at the top. So for the spider, it says the creative, and then the main theme for the spider in this deck is creativity. And then if we look at the bottom, there's 3 words, and then they're in set of 2. So the 3 words for the spider from the upright that I can see is weaving, sexuality, and art. But if the spider is flipped upside down, the 3 words are empty, depressed, and void. So it seems like there is kind of like what you would see in some tarot readers where, they read reverse cards. This deck is already set up to be read in the reverse position, depending on how the card comes out. So for that aspect, that going with animal spirituality and ancient systems with the Chinese, there are positive and negative aspects for each animal, that yin and yang, so to speak, those two opposing energies. So I do like that aspect of the deck. It seems like each deck has an overall black background with the animal picture and the I Ching number in the background. So depending on which card, as I'm noticing, like with the spider, the number is faded compared to the animal. But if you look at card 2 with the snake, the number is a little bit more pronounced in matching with the snake animal. So I guess whoever the author illustrator was, depending on which animal it was, can bring out the I Ching value, or it could be placed in the background. So that's an interesting aspect to all of these cards. So all the cards are black, back black, and then face on the card, or on the face of the card. So for those of you who, if your aesthetic is black and you want to get into uh, tarot reading, oracle reading, this is a good deck for you. I recommend it. Okay, so looking at the booklet, so we have a little booklet here. Ooh, this is glossy. So this actually was just produced 2020, so on each card, it gives you a guide. So it tells you, what's the hexagram number. So reference to the 64 hexagrams in the I Ching, an additional 15 totems. So the number at the top tells you, the hexagram number, the name, in relation to the I Ching. So in that system, the number represents the characteristic. So the number 1 represents the creative. And then the image of the animal in the middle. The main keyword, the animal name, so the image of the animal and the animal name. And then, like I said earlier, there's the positive and negative aspects of each totem. So the top part in the normal upright position is the positive aspect, and then in the reverse, that represents the negative aspect. So one thing that I just noticed, so I looked up the hexagrams for the I Ching system. And so I looked up number 1 in that system, and here it says the symbol in the Chinese language, I can't pronounce the name, but it represents force. So that term force can also be translated to the creative, which is on the card. It can also mean strong action. It can also mean the key, and it can also mean God, spirit, higher power, however you want to interpret it. And so each one of these animal totems has a correlation. So I'm looking at it right now, and it goes up to 64, and then it stops there. So I'm going to look at the deck up to 64, and let's see what's here. So according to the normal system, the last card would be the lizard. And so the last few, let's take a look. So 65, 66, 9. Okay. So these cards do not have that I Ching correlation. So since it goes up to 64, I'm assuming that the rest of the deck is, from the personal perspective of the author. So we have the bees, the cardinal, duck, elephant, cat, and fly. Now in other animal oracle decks, I have seen the elephant, I have seen the bee, I have seen a cat, a fly, and a duck. So some of these animals do correlate, but again, these are not part of the normal 64 animals of that system. They are outside of that. So let's take a look at the last few cards that are miscellaneous. We have the slug, that's interesting. We have the squirrel, we have the tick, and then the weasel or the mink, and then the woodpecker, which I mentioned earlier. So again, they do follow that same pattern. They do have their positives, they do have their negatives, but again, these animals are outside of that system. So definitely interesting that these are an add-on to this deck, but I do like, you know, the aspects of adding the animal. Again, like I said earlier, I love animals, I love plants, so that's why I prefer to use decks with those images. I'm not a fan of oracles with, you know, human or human figures on them, for reasons that I won't get into, but again, this is an interesting combination of an oracle deck and the traditional Chinese hexagram system, but tweaked. So again, this is the first time I'm hearing of this system, so my research will be very basic, very vague. Again, I do not speak Mandarin or Cantonese. I don't know what language this is written in. So my pronunciations of this system, if I butcher it, please do not destroy me. I am planning on doing a little bit more research on this before I plan on using it, but it does look like this is an ancient system that is based in ancient Chinese philosophy. So that part I think is really cool. Let's continue looking at the booklet. So we have an introduction. It says these 79 cards are designed to be used alongside the book. So I'm assuming it's this book. So it says positive in aspect polarity with the 64 hexagrams of the I Ching, 64 human design gates, and the links. And then here it says, if you've never encountered any of these systems before, you might find that one or more systems substantially comfort, guide, and aid you through the difficulties of life. We shall see. So let's going down, and then there's a little part right here that talks about animal medicine in indigenous cultures. That is true. I have learned that in native and in other indigenous cultures, animals were a key part of it. That's kind of why I have that tie to animals. So I think that's pretty nice to see. And then going through, talking about some examples, like here's one. So for example, if you encounter a fox, you may interpret a message to lay low, be clever, and stay camouflaged. And then weeks later, you pass a dead fox on the side of the road. This message may be meaning that you've been hiding too much. So definitely coming to that real world example with the animal totems. And then towards the end, it mentions the I Ching. And then throwing an I Ching coin. So that seems like a tradition that you use to match the divination with the animal. So it says to throw the I Ching, so it seems like this might be similar to dice. You need 3 coins that are the same. On each side of the coin is assigned a value of 2, the other 3. And traditionally, Chinese coins will have 2 symbols. So you could use this with, I guess you could say, American currency, or wherever you are watching this from, your currency with your coins that has 2 sides. Instead of doing 1 and 2, like here it says, you would say 2 and 3 instead. So you throw the coins together, add the value, find the sum, and then draw the line that corresponds with it. And then you repeat those steps 6 times. So you do that process 6 times, and then when you finish that process, that will relate to a card. So interesting system here. And then once you compare the symbol, then again that relates to again a symbol in that system, and then you can match and find that place. And then towards the end, just some spreads that you may use, and then some ways you can use your this deck. So definitely an interesting system. Again, I've never heard of this system before. I'm going to do my research on this to learn more about this system from 1 to 64. Again, the first 64 cards are part of the traditional system. The last, let's see, 79 minus 64, 23 cards are miscellaneous and outside of that system and were added by the author slash illustrator. Again, all the cards are black, so if that aesthetic works for you, I highly recommend it. If you're like, nah, it's too dark for me, not my thing, definitely, look otherwise. Okay, so now getting into the actual, touching feeling of the deck. So again, these are standard playing card size, maybe a little bit bigger. Yeah, a little bit bigger than a normal card. Because there are some fine cards, this is very similar to a tarot deck. A little bit annoying to shuffle, but again, these are new, so they're a little bit stiff. Definitely stiffer than some tarot deck cards, but these cards are thin. Very, very thin. So they do bend not as easily as a normal, very similar to a standard 52 deck, but when you first get them, they are very stiff cards. Okay, they do shuffle well. I do like that part. And then they're not sticking together, so that's fairly nice feature to have. And then, depending on your style, overall a good feel for the card. But again, this might be one of those cards where you're like, I need to figure out what the heck is going on before I use this. So anyway, so we got the whale, which is number 33. Interesting, so 3-3. And then everything comes in threes, so that might say something. So this is, the term here is retreat. So retreat, isolation, being in the self. In this image, the animal is hidden by the number or the I Ching symbol, the hexagram, but you can see the outline of the whale. Looks like to be a blue whale, but in this case, this is a card that's hidden by the hexagram. So that might have some symbolism there. So this is record keeper. So going within, retreating, taking a look at, what has happened, analyzing what has progressed in the past and taking account for it now. So the three positive aspects are retreat, refuge, and remembering. So this is very similar to, I guess you could say, the judgment card in the tarot deck, where you're looking back on what has happened previously, either immediately or over the last couple of years, whatever is going on in your situation. So the negative three aspects would be forgetting, deafness, and muteness. So losing your memory, losing your understanding, losing your ability to talk, losing your ability to say, learn, understand, express how you feel. And then at the bottom, we have the crow, number 62. So this is still one of the major 64 cards. It says preponderance of the small. So that's a lot. Preponderance of the small. And so this is a law. So law, and I'm hearing order, so this is very similar to justice. And the three words are impeccability, correction, and virtue. And so in the image, you can see the crow, but again, like the whale, the hexagram is a little bit more prominent than animal in this case. So again, I don't know if that has meaning, but that is the connection I'm seeing here. So I had to look up the word preponderance, and it means the quality or fact of being greater in number, quantity, or importance. So, importance of the small. So similar to the word majority, prevalent, dominant. So taking care of those that do not have that strength, that size, that power. So with law, I'm hearing taking care of the little guy, making sure the little guy has the same rights as the big guy or the big fish. And so in the negative aspects, the three words are offense, harmful, and dishonor, which definitely is the opposite of law and order. So in this case, you're reflecting on your stances on taking care of those that have trouble taking care of themselves. Maybe on a personal level, you're finally taking care of yourself, looking at all the things that did not go right and making account for those and identifying them, as well as correcting it and moving on. So again, overall, this is a different type of oracle deck. If you are interested in, Chinese philosophy, Chinese divination, and that history, this is definitely for you. If you are interested in animal totems, animal divination, this is also for you. Again, the aesthetic of this deck is all black. So again, if that doesn't work for you, I wouldn't recommend it. Again, this is actually kind of a fit for me because I do love this aesthetic, but again, this is a system that is new to me. I'm not used to this totem system, or also known as the I Ching. Again, this is in Chinese, Mandarin, Cantonese, whatever language it is. Forgive me if I say anything incorrect. But this is rooted in ancient philosophy. So again, if that is part of you, definitely take advantage of this deck. So shout out to who authorized this deck. I don't know if there is an author. So it says written and illustrated by Brynja Magnusson. So whoever you are, thank you for this. This is new, this is different, this is interesting. This is a new take on this ancient Chinese system. I'm interested in it. So thank you for sharing this with us.